How are you, everyone? This is John Zucker. I'm part of our community team, and welcome to our third product clinic. Happy to have Ron back for this clinic to dig in a little bit more specifically around AWS. And this time, Ron will be speaking to ports and protocols that you need to be aware of. So welcome again, Ron.
Thank you, John, and welcome all. Glad to be here today, and I hope we have some fun and learn something.
Awesome. Great. Very good. So before we get started, I'll just run through the logistics real quick. We're gonna run for 45 minutes. So we have that amount of time available to us. And during the session, if anyone has a question, please do ask that in the Q&A panel. And we will do our best to answer all the questions that come in. And what we plan to do and have done in our past product clinics is we'll post those questions and their answers in the VUE community, specifically within the hybrid public cloud group. If we don't have an opportunity to answer all the questions, they'll be answered there. We will also post the questions and answers that we handle during the session and post them there as well. The session is being recorded, and all of our product clinic videos are up on our YouTube channel, Gigamon TV, where you'll be able to watch those as needed later on. At the end of the session, when you close out, there's just a quick 3-question survey, and just ask you for a little bit of feedback, and of course, any ideas that you have or suggestions on future topics that we can cover. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let Ron take over, and I'll be back with you at the end of the session. So go ahead, Ron, and you can share.
Hello, all. Ron Howard here again. Thanks again for showing up today or this evening, whenever you have the opportunity to watch this video. Today, we're going to go over security groups and the requirements for defining the ports and protocols for a successful deployment inside of AWS. So our agenda is we're going to first go over just a few of what are the components within the Gigamon Cloud Suite, describe the 2 different deployment models. We will then review the different ports and protocols, or as far as ingress and egress goes. And then I'll give a quick demo going into a security group and defining the proper ingress and egress for the Fabric Manager. We could apply the same rules based upon the information I'm providing today for all the different components. And then followed up, we will hopefully have some good questions to answer for you, or answers for your questions. So let's quickly talk about the Cloud Suite in general. There's 2 methods of traffic acquisition. We have what we call a module base, where we have a lightweight agent that's installed on workloads. And then we also have native traffic forwarding utilizing AWS VPC mirroring. It all goes through a Gigamon vSeries node, or that is our acquisition point, or it's equivalent to our TA devices, our TAP aggregators, where all your traffic is routed to that point, and then we send it on to your tool set. And then again, we have the ability to orchestrate the deployment using Fabric Manager, which is your management tool, or utilizing third-party orchestration. But both those methodologies still require certain ports and protocols to be open to allow the traffic to flow from point A to point B. Let's review some basics as far as security group recommendations. Gigamon components each require their own set of ports and protocols for proper communication. And it's important and it's recommended that you create a security group for each one of these devices so that we follow the rule of least privilege. We need to make sure that the security group includes both inbound and outbound traffic for those instances. And it's important to also make sure that you stay up to date inside of our documentation as our product improves and enhancements come along, to make sure that you always have the latest ports and protocols open for your environment. And the last and most critical point is that we want to adjust, these are just recommendations. And it's always best to follow the policies for your organization to ensure proper communication. Here is an example of the flow from the user, which would be myself or you, in communicating with Fabric Manager. As we talked about, that is the management application or virtual appliance that's deployed and can communicate on an on-prem or within AWS. And the model that we're doing here, the Fabric Manager or management application is sitting or residing inside of AWS. It requires port 443 to communicate, as you can see here. And then again, we have different ports and protocols that are defined for each of the appliances that are deployed inside of the environment. The V-Series node or the tap aggregator uses multiple ports, and we'll be going over those. But this just kind of gives you a high-level overview of what's required for a successful deployment. And yes, for those people with a critical eye, I do not have the load balancer defined or the gateways in this graphic. But in 99% of instances, those are required for functional traffic flow. Let's start off with the very first one, Fabric Manager, and this is going to be the unit that we use for our example in our demo today. As you can see here, there are several required inbound rules as well as outbound rules for functionality for the environment to work properly. 443 is critical in two forms: one, for you to communicate with it, and also for Fabric Manager to communicate with the API calls inside of AWS. If it is not able to reach the public API calls, you will not have a successful deployment. So in one fashion or another, you will need to have FM having the ability to communicate with those publicly facing APIs. Now, the first question that comes to me on a regular basis: do I have to use a public IP address for Fabric Manager? Absolutely not. You just need to have some type of gateway into the public frame for that communication. Other elements is for FM to communicate with the V-Series node, and if we use the agent-based solution, also communication with the UCTV controller itself. One, for registration, and two, we also want to maintain health of the virtual appliances that are deployed inside of your environment. So having those health checks is important to ensure a successful environment and the maintenance of that environment. Here we have the V-Series node. This is our tap aggregator, our virtual appliance, where all your copied or mirrored traffic is going to end up before it's sent to the final destination. As you can see here, there are also defined inbound and outbound rules. You will see optional features available here. The ones that are required are going to be the ones that state these are specific for functionality. The next method of deployment is going to be what I mentioned previously, and that's using the taps. And those we call the UCTV agents. Those require their own unique rules for opening. As you can see here, there is an additional appliance that's deployed within your environment. This is a controller where all the tap agents will actually register with and will be relayed to the Fabric Manager, and you will see the monitored instances register within Fabric Manager. And it will keep a record of those instances that are active and the ones that have gone into a stale state. Here are the requirements for the controller that I showed you on the previous slide, as far as inbound and outbound rules. Oops, excuse me. And here are the requirements for the agents, and these fall within the subnet where your agents lie. Time for a little demo. So let me go ahead and pull this over here. So here you can see that I'm in AWS. I'm in the VPC dashboard to define your security group that you need for the different virtual appliances. You go down to security, then security groups. At this point, I have created one. So if you notice when I type in RMH, I'm a big fan of tags. It makes your life so much easier than trying to find something by a security group ID. So here is the security group that I created for the Fabric Manager, so that when I deploy a Fabric Manager in the environment, I can, in this VPC, I can easily attach the security group to the Fabric Manager for deployment, and it'll already have the appropriate permissions. But let's go ahead and take a look at what's in here so far, and we'll talk through it. So as you can see here are the inbound rules. And you're saying, well, Ron, why are your sources all set to 0? Good question. So the reason why I have it set to 0 is that I don't have anything deployed yet. But if you refer back to the documentation that I showed earlier, it's defining there that I set the source, either the IP address of the target or the subnet of where I want to capture that traffic or send the traffic to. Again, we want to follow the rule of least privilege and follow the guidelines of your rules within your own organization. We don't set the rules. We just define the basics that are required to have a successful deployment. But let's go ahead and edit it. As you can see here, I do not have a descriptor associated. Now, there is a unique issue here with AWS. A lot of times, if you copy and paste the information into the description, it will produce an error message stating that you're limited to 256 characters, or that you have a improper character associated to it. So my recommendation to save yourself a headache is to go ahead and hand type in what you want to do, but you can also use the rules and permissions that are already defined in our documentation to help guide you for the prerequisites. But let's go ahead and try and generate an error message with that. So let's go to our Fabric Manager right off the bat. So we want to have 443 available, right? So remember, I mentioned that we need to communicate with the REST APIs on the public side, plus gain access. So here I just applied the description of what the purpose of 443 is. Let's go and click Save Rules. Oh, look, it worked. That's the great thing about a live environment. It works sometimes, and sometimes it gives you an error message. But then again, let's say, for example, I have a specific subnet here for where I want to SSH from. So I can go ahead and remove the everything and then define the CIDR range that I want to use so that it is open. So say 192.168.100.0/24. So I'm only going to allow access to that from that environment. Let's go ahead and save the rules. And now I've just improved the security functionality of my security group. If you notice here, I can also look at my outbound rules. I already have descriptions defined here in this environment. But you're saying, so how do I create a security group? Let's go ahead and create one real quick. Let's go ahead and create a security group. Let's call it RMH. Real creative, right? And this one here, I want it to be for my V series node. -SG, this represents security group. Security group. for the series node. Identify my VPC. Remember, I'm a big fan of tags. Let's look here. I'm able to find the VPC that I want to put this in real quick. So I just put that there. But as you can see here, I have no rule set, and outbound rules is set to allow everything. We're going to resolve that real quick. So let's go to my rules for the B series node. I have an inbound rule of 8889. Again, I'm just setting that there until I have it deployed and I have the target areas that I want to be more constrained on the environment, unless you already have that preset. And the purpose for this allows FM to communicate. But here, let's say, since I already know where it's at, 192.168.100/28. Oops. I just created a new rule set for CIDR range, didn't I? Tags. Let's add a new tag. Let's give it a name. If I could spell. The value is RMH B series SG. Let's create the security group. Boom. But we're not done, because remember, all I did was just create basic rule. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this to include some outbound rules. Go ahead and give it to communication. I already know where it's going to, which is going to be going to my Fabric Manager. And you're asking me why did I choose a /28? Because that's a subnet where the Fabric Manager is going to lie. Now, one of the important things to take into consideration is that AWS, where public cloud in general, runs off of DHCP when you're doing the basic deployment. So if you were to redeploy the V-Series node or upgrade it, you can define it as a static IP or one unique IP, a /32. Just take into consideration that you might run into some problems when upgrading if you limit yourself on the available IP addresses for that environment. Let's go ahead and get our rule here real quick. Let's save the rule. I don't want this one. And there it is. There's the little error where that will come up occasionally when you copy and paste. So allows D series node to send health checks to FM. Now, there are several more rules that are required for this to be successful, but that is the basic method by which to create a security group. So then when I actually go forward and do the deployment of the V-Series node, I can associate this specific security group to the deployment. Questions?
I was gonna just ask you to maybe touch upon in your experience in working with customers that are deploying this, what is the most frequent area that maybe they get tripped up on or isn't very intuitive, that you find yourself helping out repeatedly?
Great question. So not having all the proper ports and protocols open for an environment and to allow the traffic to flow is one of the biggest ones that I have experienced. The two biggest fail points that we experience are the identity access management policy not properly configured to allow the proper permissions for the application or the appliance to work properly, which we addressed last month. And then also the routing of the traffic from the source to the destination and then back again. Making sure that there are no conflicts, that you don't have a deny rule that supersedes an allow rule. The way that the environment works is that it goes by the parameter to find who's first, who's next. So it does the order of operation. But it's easy to create rule sets. You might have a NACL, for example, which is going to be your first line of defense, which is a control access list. There might be some rules within there that prohibit communication to go through. So if someone has network access control list defined, we want to go and check in that environment as well as the route tables and the security groups to make sure that we have a clear path. I was thinking of it as water flowing through a pipe. And if there are control valves on that pipe that regulate the flow, do I have one of those control valves set to a condition that is a greater restriction than is what's needed for it to flow properly?
Okay. Any other gotchas, things to be aware of? And I know you mentioned the IAM policies, and in the last product clinic number 2, we dig into exactly what's required there. So so that's a useful resource. But any other gotchas, things to pay attention to as it pertains to the content that you presented?
Always check your rules. Do simple, if you have traffic already in that environment. For example, if I have two VPCs wanting to talk to each other, do I have peering enabled to where those two VPCs can communicate with each other? Or do I have the route tables defined to where allows the traffic to flow? The logical process by which networking traffic flows is going to be your route table to your NACLs to the last line of defense, which is going to be the security group. And this security group is a stateful environment. And the great thing about that is that if I'm able to reach it by default, I should be able to egress back out to the point of origin, because a security group, since it's stateful, will allow return communication with its point of origin. Or a NACL does not. It is stateless and it requires well-defined rules to be put in place for that to work. And they follow an order of operation.
Okay, very good. I'm going to go ahead and close things out real quickly. I want to share my screen. Thank you, Ron, for that. Again, just to let everyone know, and we will post these questions that I asked and that Ron brought up. We'll post those in the Hybrid Public Cloud group in the GigaVUE community. If you have additional questions that come up around this topic or any AWS, even beyond that, any Hybrid Public Cloud topic, please ask those in the group. There's lots of folks that monitor the activity there from around the world, and we'll make sure that they get answered. As I mentioned, when you exit this webinar, you will get a short survey. Please take a couple of minutes. It's not going to take you long. Love to get your feedback. And then in terms of booking things out, we are confirmed for another AWS topic with Ron for next month around deploying the Cloud Suite. So the full deployment. So that'll be a really interesting one for everyone, and I hope that you can attend. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and close things out. Thank you very much, Ron. Excellent job. Thank you for all of you who attended, and look for some details on signing up for our next product clinic. So have a great day, great evening, etc., and we'll sign off for now. Thank you, everyone.
Have a blessed day, everybody.